I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus I was evil. I never shook, baby.
So yeah, my stupid co-host, he's not here right now, and I think I think his time on the podcast is done. I think when he comes into the office tomorrow, I'm just going to tell him pack his stuff and leave
because he was late.
Yeah, he's not here, and so well, look at that, we're recording. Hey, everybody. My co-host couldn't be here. He's traveling right now, but he'll be here on the next episode probably. But no, I'm just kidding. It's funny because there've been a few episodes where he's done where I couldn't make it, and he kind of talks shit about me, so I'm just giving him a hard time.
So who is your co-host? Tell me.
Oh, Ben DeLessio. He lives in New Jersey actually, but he's in Louisiana right now.
Got it.
Yeah, being a flake, being a backstabbing flake. Well, thank you for coming on the show, man. So we got Cecil Charles here. You are a very talented singer, songwriter, musician. And I want to compliment you real quick because I'm a guitarist as well. And one thing, I was listening to some of your music, and one thing that I really like about your guitar playing is that you have a nice variety of textures. Like it's not just like strumming cowboy chords, like you do like arpeggios and then single note stuff and more percussive stuff. So I really like how you create like a nice sonic tapestry underneath your voice, man.
Well, thank you. I don't know that I set out specifically to do that. I mean, you know how it is as an artist. I guess I roll with kind of what the song needs, or I mean, more like I just kind of play the song a whole bunch and then kind of, what I'm doing with my hands, whether it's strumming or plucking. I've gotten more into the whole percussive way of playing. I probably played solely with a pick I learned some finger picking techniques and whatnot, and some, dust in the wind. Where you're starting out, you learn dust in the wind. You learn some of the ones that are classic picking patterns. But yeah, for a long time I was pretty strictly a pick guitarist.
Right.
And I think I would say just in the last 3 or 4 years, I was playing a lot up in Virginia and North Carolina, and one of the guys, one of my close friends up there, who's really talented singer-songwriter, Jonathan Brown. He his EP is coming out here shortly, but he's super good, just kind of keeping this percussive rhythm going with his right hand, and it also allows him to have like a much more interesting dynamic range. So he'll play a lot softer, than I do. It seems like with the pick, I think that was what I realized. I'm always driving a little too much. Not always, but I can. And so then that pushes my voice to be louder. Right. And I feel like just in the last few years, I've had a lot of growth with my voice that has to do with being very relaxed kind of in your insides, in your diaphragm, but all over in your face and everything. And, a lot of that, it's like I'm able to slip back into that when I turn down the volume just a little bit. Like when I play everything just a little bit softer, then it's like it kind of frees me up to be more expressive. And I didn't realize that. I mean, I've been singing since I was a kid. I didn't ever really take singing lessons, but I mean, I sang in choirs and that kind of thing. And I started playing guitar when I was 9 or 10 years old. My dad played, and so I grew up kind of doing all this because it was around and because I loved it. But not, and I took guitar lessons, but again, not really ever singing lessons. And I don't regret that I didn't per se, but I feel like I'm learning things that I think other people have known for a long time that I'm just like finally figuring out, but which has been wonderful, I would say, for me as an artist. I mean, I'm about to be 40, and so at the same time, I feel like I'm more in love with music than I ever have been in my life. And not because I didn't love music before, but there's something specifically about singing when you can kind of get into that very relaxed state that becomes, very meditative, very much like kind of a religious experience, I would say.
Yeah.
It's not like I can force it to be that way, but I can kind of slip into those things, and it's been wonderful. So anyway,
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, all that to say, that's why I am excited that I'm doing more than just picking, because I think it's somehow it's part of this whole growth.
Yeah, no. So you touched on an interesting topic, because I have a bachelor's degree in music, but you touched on something interesting where you said like you're kind of stumbling upon things that more sort of trained musicians have known for a long time, but it's weird because I think, and maybe this is just from my experience, because I was being taught, I was being graded on certain techniques.
Mhm.
They didn't stick with me as well. Like there are lessons that are sort of like, okay, I'm just listening to what you're telling me because I have to make the grade. And then
Right.
it wouldn't be until like 10 years later that I'm like, oh shit, like I understand the importance of that. So I think, even if you don't have a formal background, I think in many ways, stumbling upon a lesson yourself, like doing it, we're sort of like a hard won lesson. I think that makes you appreciate it a hell of a lot more.
Definitely. I mean, I can look back at my years and years of recordings and be like, wow, I wish I was singing like I was today on that
Yeah.
song, and again, not in a rueful way, but
Mhm.
I'm very aware of, it's almost like a freedom. I
Mm.
I don't know if that makes sense exactly, but it feels like for me, for singing for a long time, I grew up doing martial arts. I
Mhm.
grew up doing sports. I was a very physically active person, even though I was also an artist and, artistically minded. And
Right.
so, like with martial arts, you're always like tense in your stomach and your diaphragm. Everything is, stiff, not stiff, but, you come back to this kind of core that's tough.
Right.
And
Right.
that's exactly opposite of what I need for singing. But I didn't know that. And so, for me, it's like for the last however many years, 35 years or so, I've been like clenching a lot more than I needed to in order to make the amount of sound that I thought I needed.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, and so it's been really interesting. And I do, I love your thoughts on that. I mean, did you have any vocal classes as part of your music major?
Not really. I mean, I took solfege. Um,
Okay.
so like the whole hand
Or
sign
you're
thing and do re mi
right,
and
and
all
do
that
re
shit.
mi. Yeah, exactly.
But no actual like singing lessons.
Hmm.
But the idea of relaxation still resonates with me because I tend to be kind of a more tense person.
Hmm.
So I remember when I took piano lessons for a bit, and so my instructor he would sometimes test me on this. So it'd be like, okay, so run through the piece real quick. So okay, so I'm playing, and then he'll slap my hand, and like if my hand doesn't move from the piano, he's like, okay, like I want your hand just kind of fly, like that's how
Hmm.
relaxed you need to be when you're playing piano. So relaxation is I think really important. Not just you touched on the vocal aspect, but also from a very tactile perspective as well.
Sure.
When I was taking classical guitar lessons in college, um, you know, because it was nylon strings, you don't need to press on the strings that hard. And if anything, like by not being so tense, it makes you play more fluidly and even more quickly. So that that was definitely something that I needed to work on a lot. It reminds me a bit of do you follow Jocko Willink at all? The
Some.
former
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
yeah, he's really into martial arts, and he was talking on one of his podcasts. He was talking about he was training someone, and then he keeps telling him, you're too tense, you need to relax. And then a student was like, yeah, but I can't relax, and he goes, well, then relax harder. But it's like a weird counterintuitive thing, but it's like, yeah, you really do kind of have to. It's for those of us who are a little more tense, it does require effort to not put in effort in a weird way,
Well,
I think.
I mean, I don't think Jocko's wrong in that sense. And I mean,
Yeah,
obviously
yeah,
he's training something that he has expertise about, but
yeah, yeah.
I think it's kind of the secret to everything. And it's not, the hard thing is like, like, if you really are asking yourself, how do you relax? Like,
Mm,
what is that process physically in your body
yeah.
to relax? And you
Mm,
can tell people to relax. And usually that means to them like wanting to not feel the anxiety that they're feeling at the moment, and maybe
yes.
breathing and hoping that it goes away. But it's like, I mean, and I've talked about this on Twitter a lot, but like
Mm,
for me, it's realizing that it's almost the opposite. It's not a resistance to the feeling of the anxiety. I mean,
mm,
most of us are thinking we need to get rid of the anxiety to relax.
Right. Right.
And what I'm realizing, it's kind of hit me in the last year, and it's changed my whole voice and everything, is like, you can consciously choose to feel anxiety in your body.
Mm.
And so it's weird, but I call it my mental cursor. Like in the same way that you can think about the tip of your finger and just think about it long enough and it will start to buzz.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's weird that we can do that, right? That we can
Yeah.
put our mind on our finger and then the finger will start to buzz.
Yep.
But in the same way, we can take our mind and put it like, and in the location of your body where you're feeling anxiety, whether it's like shooting down your legs or if it's like around your heart
Yeah.
or if it's in your head. And like for me, it's all over. Like it's not, and I wouldn't even consider myself an anxious person. It was more like realizing, like focusing so much on singing over the last few years and having a few occasions where I was slipping into what I call now is a flow state. I mean, I was slipping, I would have maybe like 3 seconds or 10 seconds during a song where all of a sudden, like all the tension went away. The song became easier than it had ever been. And all of a sudden I was singing, doing things that I had not practiced, but were exactly correct for that moment. Or like, you know, very obviously above where I was singing before. Technically and artistically, it was like for that time,
Yeah.
I was elevated.
Yeah.
And it happened enough times, I would say, over the past 2 or 3 years to where I'm like, what is going on? Because whatever that is, that's what I want. That's what I need to do as an artist to get back to that state.
Yeah.
And I noticed that when it would happen, there would be like a dramatic decrease of pressure in my head, which like, again, when I'm singing, because I learned to sing wrong, you know, it's like I'm tensing everything, which pushes all this pressure up into my head, you know, and the neck is tense and everything. But my head itself feels like it would like drop out pressure wise and everything would relax. And so I don't know, I just started focusing on sensations in my head, and that sounds kind of crazy. I realize that, but at the same time, like I realized that again, just like you can put your mind on the tip of your finger, I could focus, I could like just go and feel the sensations in my head where it was tense. Like if I was singing and I could feel the pressure kind of happening, then I could say, okay, well, let's go feel this thing. And somehow feeling it would like concentrate it. And then the rest of my body would kind of relax. And I would sometimes and more consistently start to slip into like a flow state when I was singing while concentrating on the sensations. And again, it's not every time. But the flow state is like, it's so enjoyable. And it's so like artistically, it's such a level above that it's like, all I need to do is touch that every once in a while. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. I'm going in the right direction. Okay. I don't have that every time, but I know where I'm going, you know? And so as soon as that started happening, and as soon as I could start kind of encouraging that to happen within my gigs, playing gigs turned from what it used to be, which was like, and I've always loved music. I love songwriting. I have always liked my voice, but I knew I wasn't a virtuosic singer. Like, I mean, I lived in Nashville for a while. It's like you hear really talented people everywhere. You know where you are if you're honest with yourself.
Yep.
And and so for me, the singing part, the performance part was because of some level of stage fright and just not feeling like I was doing as good as I could be, was always a task, was always a chore. And now it's like not. Now it's like, I'm excited to go play. I'm excited to play every day. And it's interesting. And it all seems to have to do with the willingness to feel the anxiety in your body. And, which, I mean, that's a lot of religions talk about that in a way. It's very much the same kind of age-old wisdom, but it seems to apply to singing, which makes me wonder, like, are the really talented singers, are they experiencing something like that often in the way that I am? Like, I hope that they are. I really do. I mean, and I kind of want to sit down with, somebody.
Yeah.
Ariana Grande, just because she's, attractive. And I'll ask her, like, hey, are you getting the flow state while you're singing? Because your voice is great. Like, does this resonate with you at all, what I'm talking about? Or am I just crazy? I don't know.
This calls to mind, for a bit, I took violin lessons in college. And my violin instructor got really frustrated with me because I would play quietly because, it takes years to get a decent tone out of just being able to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with a clear, consistent tone takes years. It just because there are so many factors, like the angle of the bow, the speed of the bow going across the string, how much pressure you're applying. It is like there are a bunch of different tactile factors that go into violin playing. And so because it would sound like a screechy cat whenever I would put the violin to the string and start bowing, I would play quietly. That was just like my instinct. And he goes, see, this is why I hate teaching adults and why I love teaching kids. When you tell a kid to play loudly, they'll do it because they don't know what a violin sounds like. They don't have like a standard of like, they've never listened to Ishak Perlman and go, oh, that's what I want to sound like. You tell a kid to play loud and they play loud. And he goes, even if it sounds terrible, I can, I'm experienced enough. I can be like, okay, it's the angle of the bow. That's what's wrong. I can tell you what's wrong with it. And he goes, but adults, they have this preconceived notion of what a good violin sounds like. So when they don't get that tone immediately, they play quietly because it sounds so bad. And he goes, but I can't help you if I can't hear you. They're just adults are just too self-conscious. So one of the things that's helped me, again, one of these lessons that I learned, in a formal environment, but didn't really appreciate until years later, was this idea of just when you're learning something new, go for broke. Like, accept the fact that you're not going to sound great, that you're not going to get it right on the first time. And what that does, it's like, it just kind of gets the butterflies out in a way where it's like, okay, like I know how bad I can sound, but because of that, it's like, okay, now it's only up from here. Like now I know like what my limits are and what I need to start working on. So that has definitely helped me. I think anxiety is maybe a little too strong of a word, but in terms of like being a little I'm learning something new, but it looks really technical and really difficult. I don't know if I could do it. It's like, no, just play it as fast and ridiculous as you can. Because now you know what to run away from. And so that's been a technique that has helped me kind of get over, I guess, like insecurities or hangups about, learning something new when developing as a musician.
Well, to your point, like I realized exactly what you're saying, how, an adult violin player would be, it's a hesitancy. You're playing more quiet because you're aware of not being at the level that you want. And it's the same thing for me when I'm singing. It's like I can feel myself clenching in a hesitant way, keeping me from fully, because it's like I'm always ready to, this is the wrong me, right? I'm always ready to like pull back, to like grab the sound and pull it back if it's not where I want it to be. And that's not right. It just doesn't work, because all of that, like that quick reaction where you want to like correct, is exactly the opposite of what you need to have a big, full, relaxed sound.
Right.
And I had no idea that was the case.
Yeah, like flipping a pancake, just like you can't do it like mid flip. It's like just go fucking all the way.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, but I think, honestly, I think that applies to like so many things in life. And, in terms of just like feeling anxiety, and again, I don't feel like I'm an anxious person, but as I've become more and more aware of it, I'm like, oh, wow, I do have pockets of tightness, in my stomach or around my heart or wherever. But like, I'm doing it right now. Like I'm feeling it right now because it's important for me to be relaxed with you in this conversation. So, and so putting like, I've described it as like keeping one hand on the sensation of your body at all times while doing the rest of the mental work that is required in a conversation, or if you're singing or driving or whatever you're doing. And I don't know, it seems to make things just kind of flow.
Yeah.
For lack of, I don't like using a woo-woo word.
Right.
but it kind of feels that way. So
so one thing I want to ask you, do you have any aspects of your creative process that other people might think are weird? Like, are you cool with opening up about like any like quirky, weird habits in the creative process?
Sure. I mean, sure. I'll tell you everything I do. I don't know that many are all that weird, especially after listening to like Rick Rubin and some other guys on podcasts talking about the songwriting process. Songwriting process for me in general is like some sort of, I stumble on a guitar progression that I like, or I hear a melody in my head and I'm like, oh, I figure out what chords need to be underneath it. But it tends to be me like singing into my phone or setting my phone down and grabbing my guitar and just vocalizing. Maybe I'll have like a word or two for a chorus hook or, the
Yeah.
beginning of a verse or whatever, but I don't tend to have much more than that.
Right.
And then, but I'll still vocalize the whole song. I'll sing it for those listening. I'll sing it without words, just kind of the melody of it. As if you're singing along to a song that you don't know the words to, but you know the melody. Like I'll do exactly that, and kind of like they'll sound like half-formed words sometimes. And then like I'll sit on that for days or months or years sometimes, and like I have a big batch of songs in progress that when one grabs me again, when it's like you need to work on this, especially if you have like something meaningful to write about, something that you're finally thinking about, or something that happened in life or whatever.
Right.
Then I'll kind of like take the pieces and put them together and work on lyrics. So for me, it's mostly song wise, it's mostly vocalizing at first with some sort of chord melody, and then adding lyrics later. I have thousands of voice memos on my phone, so like I do it all the time, like I'll be falling asleep and like wake myself up and just sing into my phone. And half the time the next morning I listen to it, I'm like, I have no idea what that was supposed to be. But sometimes you're like, oh yeah, like that's good. Let me go, make that something a little bit more official. And then I do a lot of composing as well, but I wouldn't call it composing like in the sense of I'm not a composer for film.
Right.
I'm kind of a self-taught composer, using because MuseScore, and I'm sure other notation software, composition software, but MuseScore is a free one.
Yeah.
Where like it's all notes on a staff, and so you have as many staffs as you want, and you can say this is the cello, this is the violin, or whatever, and then you just place the note, and like it'll ring the sound of the a cello whole note of C or whatever. It'll play that for you, and then I can just like click on my cursor, move it up and down, and get the note that I know I want.
Right.
And I'll just like compose whole pieces basically by ear. I know notation well enough to be like, okay, what I'm going for is like a dotted quarter note here or whatever. Like I can figure that out. But to turn around then the opposite way into like sight read notes on a staff, I'm not great at that. The notation software is really kind of a cheat, but at the same time, like it opened up. I started doing that right around the time of COVID. I'd done one like maybe a year before in 2019, but then COVID hit, and for whatever reason I kind of stopped playing guitar and singing for like 6 months. Like I just COVID was kind of a depressing time, especially in the beginning. And I just remember like I just didn't want to sing. I didn't want to play, but I was diving into the composition stuff, and I'm like, okay, as long as I'm staying creative, let's do that. Let's do this. And in the last 2-3 years, I guess since 2020, I have like nearly 40 pieces that are 3 to 5 minutes. They're often built kind of like a song, kind of with some verse melodies and chorus melodies, but they're all orchestral pieces with flutes and violins and bassoons and
very cool, man.
Harp and and I kind of have kept the same ensemble of instruments.
Are there any particular composers who have been inspirational to you?
I mean, certainly. At the same time, I don't know that I'm trying to make my stuff sound like them, but I mean, like Hans Zimmer. I mean, it's hard to argue with what he does. He did the opening of the Crown soundtrack too, I believe. I think he did the Crown theme. Obviously, he did Interstellar, right? And
he's done, I think, almost all of Chris Nolan's
all the
films.
Nolan stuff. His stuff is great. The guy who does a lot of the other Crown stuff, which is Martin Phipps, I think is his name.
Okay.
Phillips, I think. I can look it up. The recent, like the Crown season 4 has some of the most. There's one scene in the episode where Diana goes to Balmoral. I don't know. Do you watch The Crown at all?
No.
Are you familiar with what it is though?
I don't think so, actually. Is it on
Oh,
Netflix or something, or is
yeah,
it?
it's a
Okay.
Netflix show. It's been going on for a number of years. I think they have 4 or 5 seasons, but basically it's following Queen Elizabeth
Mm,
from the time that she became queen up to the time where I mean they were a number of seasons in. They were had like Princess Diana, and I think
right.
the next season is probably when Princess Diana dies. Anyway, but
A spoiler
the
alert.
yeah, right. Sorry, world. But it's a great show.
Mm,
Yeah, I love their music choices, and also the actual compositions made for the series are gorgeous. Like there are a
nice.
number of pieces that I'll listen to. I'm like, yeah, I would like to write that.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people where I get jealous of other people's work very often. I don't know if jealous is the right word, but a lot of people are like, man, I wish I wrote that. I wish I
Yeah.
wrote that. And I don't necessarily feel that very often, but there were some pieces in The Crown where I was like, that's right up my alley. I would love to write something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to integrate like the more orchestral side with your singer songwriter side at all?
So I've done some.
Mm,
I mean, I've actually taken what I composed and then pulled that in and like laid vocal tracks over it and
cool.
had some interesting stuff. Though again, I was doing that maybe 2 years, like around the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
Haven't done much since. So it would be fun to do just because vocally I'm a lot better than I was 2 years ago.
Right.
So it'd be
Right.
interesting to see. But it's cool. It's a different vibe.
Yeah.
I'll have to send you some.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely, man.
there's a song on my YouTube called "Breaking," where there's the instrumental version, the composed instrumental version from MuseScore,
Yeah.
and then the same essentially thing, but with my vocals on top.
Very cool.
And that was fun. I mean, just
Yeah.
to see what it sounds like. It's interesting. So
That's awesome, man.
yeah.
So another question I want to ask you is, do you think that artists need to believe in something greater than themselves in order to create great art? And so, this can be something religious or it can be something else entirely. But I mean, do you think that like having a grander purpose or belief in something is important to produce great art?
I mean, the short answer I think is yes,
Hmm,
but that's a tough. I mean, what is that greater purpose? You
right,
know,
right.
could an atheist produce great art? Of course,
Sure.
but at the same time, like that person, I think needs to. I don't know that it's necessarily belief, some sort of structured belief in something else that enables you to be a good artist. And hey, the people listening might not like my art, so you can take or leave my opinion. But
Sure, sure.
um, I do think that you have to be vulnerable and open because you have to be honest. And what does it mean to be honest? I mean, it means you have to be willing to take how you really feel about something and then make something with that.
Right.
Um, it- I was talking to a friend of mine just recently about how, like, I feel really lucky because I'm an artist, because what we do as artists, we tend to take the negative, we often take negative things in life, and then it's like we're able to kind of transmute them into something beautiful or poignant. The word poignant is great because it's like kind of should be sad, but then you turn it a little bit and it's pretty or it's beautiful or it makes, there's a silver lining.
Right.
And I think artists do that all the time. But I think you can only really do that if you're being honest with who you are as a human being at that moment, what you really feel. There so often, so it seems like people want to make art that fits in or is of a certain genre or whatever. And in some ways, like, I get it. Like if you love Americana music and you're like, okay, I'm listening to Americana, and to get that sound, I need to have certain instruments and certain tempos perhaps, and you work and you make that sound, you make a piece of art that's within that genre, that's just fine. But I think it's when people put their ideas about the art above the art itself.
Right.
And again, that's a nebulous thing to say. What does that really mean? I'm
Sure.
not sure, but there's I think we all know when there's the authenticity that we're looking for, in in somebody's art, when you can tell that they're a real human being with real anxieties, real insecurities, real love, real interest in life. If you haven't seen Roger Scruton's Why Beauty Matters,
that's on my list. I've been meaning to check that out.
That's an amazing documentary, essentially where he goes in, and it was probably in the early 2000s, and he's like, let's take a look at a lot of the art that's out there that's happened over the last 40 years, especially kind of like avant-garde, or like the brutalism in architecture, or the the R. Mutt urinal, and people saying that these things that most people would look at and say are objectively ugly. No, of course they're art. And his whole point is like, well, that's putting the idea that art can be anything. That's putting that above whether or not it really resonates with the artist or with the viewer. Like, it does that magical thing that we're trying to like talk about. Yeah. And his whole point was like, you don't have to sit there and listen to somebody tell you that ugly thing over there is beautiful, and you don't have to think it's beautiful. Because I mean, he's a philosopher, but he's kind of stepping in saying, hey, they're in a lot of cases here, people are essentially asking you to lie about what you think about what is beautiful.
Yeah.
And so in that same vein, like, I think artists just have to be honest. And I mean, human beings are beautiful. We're also, messed up, and we're a whole bundle of conflicting desires and goals and that kind of thing.
Right.
Even a whole bunch of good ones, like, even if you have a number of different good things that you're interested in, you're still conflicted about which one to work on or which one to put your time in.
Yeah.
And when people are honest about that, other people are like, oh yeah, I've been there. I've felt that, yeah. Versus like, no, I haven't ever thought a urinal is gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't resonate. I mean, maybe in some specific light, or who knows, but ultimately it's like, I want to know that the artist is a person.
Right.
Like, that's what I want. And I think for that to come through, that person has to be honest.
Right.
And that takes, showing a side of yourself. I mean, hey, I'm a guy, like, I went to the Naval Academy, but I'm like writing sappy love songs most of the days of the week. That's who I am.
Right.
And, I'm sure a lot of my fellow Naval Academy graduates are like, he's kind of a sappy love song guy, and it doesn't really fit into their idea of masculinity or military or whatever, but that's me. And so it's, there's again, I'm not tooting my own horn, but there's an element of risk in terms of me saying who I really am.
Yes.
And you get feedback from the world on that about who you really are, versus like me putting something else that's not true out there just in hopes of getting a different reaction or getting more accolades or getting more acceptance.
Right.
So in terms of like a higher purpose, like I think that people who have a joy in life, who have a love for life, those people tend to be more willing to be honest, because it seems like it's like, hey, there's something here that I love, whether or not other people like me or not. Like, I love life. Right. It may not be everything that everybody else loves, but there's something about this life that I love that keeps me going.
Yes.
And that sort of meaning, I mean, a lot of people find that meaning in religion. A lot of people find that meaning in art and philosophy or whatever. But yes, I think that meaning, it's like the meaning has to be there, even though the art doesn't have to have a specific meaning.
Right.
Yeah.
You touched on something about sort of like the nebulous aspect of believing in something greater, and I was kind of intentionally vague about when I said believing in something, because I'm just fascinated by this. Maybe because I'm an atheist, but at the same time, I don't want the stuff that I create. I really try not to do something where it's like, oh, like I'm doing it because it's what's in right now, and that can make me money. I was like, oh, I really don't care about that. And so many of my favorite, whether it's composers or musicians or filmmakers or writers, were willing to do something that you maybe went against the grain in their own time, but they in their mind they kind of foresaw the potential for their work to last. And so like it's like, okay, yeah, so even if it wasn't something as specific as God or some other spiritual belief, but you were like, yeah, but this story, like what I'm trying to do here is to dig deeper into what it means to be human. And even if people don't fully recognize it now, I'm betting on my ability to create something that will resonate later on, which I think is still kind of like the idea of kind of tying into like a deeper or higher meaning, I guess. So yeah, no, but
I was going to say, like, the things that you love, and I would put it as simply as this: have you ever gotten teary-eyed over something in life?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's as simple as that, because
Right.
what is it that's making you, now I'm not saying you have to say it's God that's making you teary-eyed, but I'm saying there's something in those moments where life is overwhelming you. And I don't mean teary-eyed in like necessarily a sad way, like
Right.
deep sorrow, but like, wow, this is gorgeous and meaningful in some deep way.
Yeah.
And whatever that is, like I think ultimately for people, it's like, go toward the thing that makes you feel that way, or do something that makes you feel that way once a day. It doesn't have to be your job, like, hey, not everybody gets to, do the job that they love. It just doesn't work. Life doesn't always work out that way, but you can remind yourself that, hey, I've gotten teary-eyed over whatever. And so in that moment, life overwhelmed me with its meaningfulness. Whether you want to call that God or not, it doesn't matter. It's like, it's that kind of thing that I want to say, like, is the sustenance, like, for all of us, artists and non-artists alike.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess, if, as long as what you're working toward is in that vein, I think, like, you're gonna make something cool. You're gonna make something at least that resonates with you, and like, that's like, ultimately that's what matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you want to be able to make something that you can go back and listen to later and enjoy, because like, in the end, I make my art for me, and
Yes.
but I feel very lucky that other people like it, even to the degree that they do.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
We doing okay
do
with
you-
the light? Sorry, I'm gonna try to get this a little bit better.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
It's just the sun is going down, and there we go. Okay, cool.
Do you follow? Are you familiar with Kay Clarity? She's on Twitter. She's a singer songwriter.
She in LA?
Yes. Yeah.
I think we follow each other. I haven't talked to her much, but I think I know who she is. Yeah.
She's great. We've had her on the show, and I've
Okay.
actually met her in person. She took me to a Latin mass a few weeks ago. That was actually really cool. But
Yeah, what was
she
that like?
tweeted. It was
Oh,
cool.
okay.
Yeah, it was because I'm a lapsed Catholic, and she knew this, but I also love classical music, and so she's like, hey, there's a Baroque concert at my church if you want to check it out. I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And then she goes, it's also a Latin mass, so you're hearing the work in the context that it was composed for. So so it was actually like a really cool experience. One thing I do love about Catholicism is that there is definitely an emphasis on aesthetics and beauty.
Sure.
So it was like going to a church, but it was like a very ornate church, and so and with the music and then just sort of like the decorum that came with what everyone was doing. And so I told her afterwards, I was like, okay, don't get excited, but there were a couple of moments where I felt my atheism start to crack a little bit. But anyways, I bring her up though because she just tweeted this out, and I thought it would actually be she tweeted this like an hour ago, and I was like, oh, I think this might be a good discussion for us.
Sure.
So she tweeted out, what would a cultural renaissance in America actually look like? What would its effects be if it happened in average lives? And I want to hear locally, nationally, in high culture, in folk culture, and pop culture. So I mean, like you know, we were both kind of more on the I guess heterodox side of things, of not kind of really fitting into either specific camp.
Right.
And we're definitely worried about what's going on in culture, whether it's like this crazy woke stuff or the cancel culture and all this crazy crap. But to Kay's question about what do you think a creative or artistic renaissance would look like in America? Let's keep it specific.
I mean, the easy answer is like people will remember what's important in life, the things that give them that sustenance that I was talking about, and they're going to do more of it. That's the easy answer. I don't, what that is specifically, I'm not sure, other than I think it's already happening. I think it began around the time of like Rogan getting really big, and Jordan Peterson, and essentially these YouTube and other streaming platforms kind of making it popular for people to sit and listen to two people like us. I mean, who knows how many people will listen to this, but these types of things where people are sitting and listening to real conversation. I mean, we don't have the news speaker cadence, and we're not talking like this, and it's people want that. We've been force fed that for however many years, and when the only kind of discussion platform was the news or some, big three network, like that was mostly what you got. And I know that there were good examples of real discussions, and I'm blanking on the names, but like my parents talk about some cool debates that happened, on mainstream TV in, the 80s or whatever. That
like it was like Firing Line. They had like Thomas Sowell and
Buckley. Sowell and Buckley. That was exactly what they were talking about. Yeah. And so like they do exist. At the same time, it's become, I mean, Joe Rogan's the most popular podcast in the world. Which again, whether you like Rogan or not, the idea is people are just sitting and talking about interesting things very in-depthly for
hours,
as long
like 3 or 4 hours,
3 or 4 hours. And
yeah.
So I think has been the beginning, whether the beginning was earlier or not, it doesn't really need to matter. But like, to me, that aspect of our culture right now is something that gives me a lot of hope. I mean, I see how much, I've been active on Twitter kind of since COVID started, though I had an account back to like 2009. But, I got active on Twitter after watching Brett Weinstein and Heather Heying. They were, in the very beginning of COVID, doing all this diving into what was going on with COVID and encouraging people to ask questions via Twitter. And, I got onto Twitter and realized, hey, and, this had been happening for years prior, but I'm like, wow, people are talking about some of the most interesting things daily, minute by minute on this platform. I can jump on here and have the conversation that I want with anybody at any hour of the day. Which is really cool, And so big tech worries aside, like the problems with Twitter aside, what it brings to us, I think, is fantastic. So, again, whether it's Twitter or just, it's not like Twitter is that complicated. I mean, I do wonder, I'm like, how, like, can't Elon Musk just like fire 99% of the people? Like, what does it really take to keep this thing going? Because in some ways it hasn't really changed for the last 10 years. It's still just a text platform. You like share photos and stuff. And anyway, I think the revolution is going to be people having lots of conversations about the things that are really important to them. People, I think, are already tired of social media. Like, I think we're tired of glorifying ourselves and or looking at other people's lives, and just scrolling through hour by hour. I mean, we've all done it. I kind of hit a point about a year ago where I'm just like, I just can't do this anymore. I mean, Twitter feels a little different because it's a conversation. You're talking about ideas. But just like scrolling through, people's lives. I mean, it's, in one aspect, it's great because you can keep in touch with the people who live across the country who you haven't seen in a while. But it's like, man, life's right here. Like, go out, go live your life. Just go live it. You don't have to take pictures. I mean, you can take pictures, but you don't have to like think of every moment as some social media post. And I think we all like got lured into thinking of life that way. We all did for a long time. And it's not like I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. It's like we all did that. And then we realized, like, it's just not, it doesn't sustain you. It doesn't make you teary eyed. It doesn't it just doesn't do that.
I feel like over the last couple of years, ever since I read this study from a few years ago, the study that said that the more you take pictures, like if you're on vacation or whatever, the more you take pictures, the less you remember the moment. And I know that, you know, you take pictures to remember, but it's like, I ever since then, I've almost entirely just stopped taking
Hmm.
pictures of, like, if I see like a really cool, if I'm traveling or on vacation or something, I almost never take pictures or video anymore. I'm just kind of like, no, I want to, because it's also like interrupting the moment. If I'm seeing something really cool, it's like, oh, I'm just gonna, it's like, no, I want to just like sit and appreciate it.
Right.
And also, like, you know, whatever joy I got out of, oh, dude, check out this cool thing that I saw when I visited wherever. And it's like, but that joy, it's like so, it's so
It's not the
brief.
same.
Yeah. And it's just sort of like, either I just explain it and just be like, yeah, dude, when you go to that place, check out that spot. It's like, I can't even describe it. Just go do it. But it's like, yeah,
Sure.
like I've kind of gotten to the point now where I'm like, I don't want to take pictures anymore.
Hmm.
Or once in a while I do, but
Yeah.
it's dropped quite a bit.
You know, I got into film photography a number of years ago, and the girl I was dating, and like film photography is in the same way that like Latin mass, where you don't know what they're saying.
Right.
So I'm gonna little tangent.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed, but like I can listen to opera if it's in a different language. As soon as you put it in English, I'm like, I don't want to hear this. Like I don't want them singing the words. Like I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
It sounds corny as soon as I can understand the words.
Yeah.
And like, that's not really fair to somebody who wants to write an opera in English, that I just immediately have like, ooh, like, opera in English. But there is something, I think, and you know, I'm a singer songwriter, so I'm putting words to music all the time. Like,
right.
But there is something about the kind of like not knowing what's being said, just having to listen to the sound of, you know, whether it's a Latin mass, you know, you're just hearing the words being chanted, and you know it's like referencing things that are very important, but you don't necessarily have to think about the words themselves.
Yeah.
And it can make the experience, whether it's music or a mass or whatever, it can make that more meditative, I would say, in a way. And so film photography kind of feels like that, because you don't get to look at the picture immediately after. One of my friends said something a number of years ago about how like we're immediately sentimental. And I was like, that's such a good line. He's like, you take a photo and then everybody like sits there and like, look at how I look, look at how you look. And like everybody's getting excited and sentimental about the moment that's happening right now.
Yeah.
And you're like, but film photography, I think, lets you, because you're playing with this camera that feels old and it's got visceral tactile things that feel cool. You know, you're playing with the sensor and you're you know, adjusting the aperture and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then you have to wait, you know, month later till you finally go to the store and get it developed or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm gonna still stand by my love of film photography, but I totally understand what you're saying. And I thought that whole like immediately sentimental line that one of my friends had, I was like, that's so true.
Yeah. So getting back to this question of a renaissance.
Yeah.
So I like your line of thinking about, you know, this recent turn towards like, you know, depth and authenticity. Do you think that will translate into like music and film and literature? Do you think that's we're gonna start seeing more of that?
I mean, I certainly hope so. It's not like you can go dictate artists to all of a sudden be deeper than they were before.
Sure.
But I think also that if a culture, if a society is deeper, then they're going to encourage the artists who are deeper. You know, they're going to be excited. They're going to go to the shows and it's hard because like, what is a deeper artist? I don't know. I don't know exactly what that means. And I don't want to sit here and sound like that's always me or whatever. But you look at the stuff that came out of the 60s and 70s, you know, and you see the amount of kind of cultural upheaval that was happening then. And it seemed to encourage songs that were about real things. You know, you had like the bubblegum pop in the 50s or whatever.
Yeah.
And it in many ways didn't compare to like Crosby, Stills and Nash, like Wooden Ships on the Water, or, you know, the Ohio song, you know, talking about like people actually getting shot, you know, and but doing it in a way that's beautiful, like taking something really hard and transmuting it, using it as a catalyst to make something beautiful. And I mean, man, the world's been through some hard stuff in the last few years.
Yep.
I think in the same way that people like Joe Rogan is the most popular, like people want to sit and listen to people have real conversations. I think that is translating into art and music. And, but can I point at a specific artist where it's like, oh, look, this person's obviously a product of this cultural renaissance. I can't say that yet.
Yeah. It's always difficult when you're in the era itself. Right.
I'm stoked about it though. Like, I mean,
yeah.
I've heard James Lindsay many times say that he thinks that we're on the new enlightenment, and I'm like, that it doesn't sound wrong. It doesn't sound super far fetched.
Yeah, I'm pretty hopeful about our cultural future, and we might not even see it happen immediately. It might be a few years or towards maybe even a decade from now. But one of the things that has definitely given me some hope is I've studied music history a bit, and so many movements maybe even all creative movements, artistic movements, started as a reaction to the previous one. So when you look at you talked about this hunger for deeper and longer conversations, that I hope that's a sign of a bit where it's like, yeah, we're kind of getting tired of just sort of bland cookie cutter short snippets of kind of entertainment or information, and I hope that we start seeing movies that are more profound. I hope we start getting more literature that's more profound. And when I say profound, it doesn't necessarily mean like War and Peace or anything, but it could be something where it's like, oh, this song is about something that's not just somebody getting back at an ex-boyfriend or some shit, where it's like, okay, you're actually talking about something very specific and something very meaningful, but when you do that, you actually touch on something that's more universal. This isn't just bland top 40 shit. Like, this is actually something that's a little more deep. So I tend to be pretty optimistic, and obviously we're going to go through a lot of growing pains, and something might become very trendy that lasts for a year and it's really garbage, but progress, like genuine progress is a process, and it's not something that happens. Okay, like we're tired of bland superficial crap. We want enlightenment right now. It'll definitely take a while, but I definitely tend to lean more towards the optimistic side of our culture, of the future of our culture.
I mean, I do too. Technology is scary. In the sense of they really could kind of turn it all off at once, or, unbank all of us at the same time, or do some, they could try some crazy things like that. Which, is something I think we need to be aware of the double-edged sword of these technological advances that allow us to pay with our phone, or, use whatever, digital thing to do whatever. It makes it easy, and then it makes it easy to control. At the same time, like, how are you going to control, 7 billion people if we were all on Twitter or some competing service, sharing, for example, sharing real-time videos of what is happening on the ground somewhere that disproves the official narrative that's being put out there. It's like, there's a power in people speaking truth, like, or honestly. I tend to use the word honesty more than truth, just because like, who knows what the ultimate truth is in any situation, but if you are at least honest about what you saw and heard and thought and said or whatever, like, that is what we need. That's what makes the world go around. Just be honest with yourself and with other people. And I feel like the something like Twitter that puts all of these people together allows people to be honest with each other. And, some totalitarian who's trying to, like, curb free speech can't keep up when just it's a numbers game. You have, and I think I didn't say this before, but, like, I've said this to many people. I hope Elon Musk is a good person. I really do. I mean, it's hard to argue with the fact that he spent $44 billion for Twitter. Like, nobody's ever done that before. That's pretty amazing, and so a lot of people are still wary of him, and I understand. He's kind of a futurist. He's kind of a technologist, where he seems to be excited about what technology is going to do in terms of interweaving brains and all, all that stuff, and or taking us to various planets. And okay, but at the same time, he comes down hard for free speech, and like,
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, what we need are people who are willing to be honest with each other, and a world where we can be honest with each other immediately, and so that the people who want to control the story can't, because the story is what it really is. Like, the world is how it really happened. And and so, technology, I'm excited about what it brings. At the same time, sure, I'm still wary. And I hope that we make it through. Who knows?
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point there about Twitter allowing people to be more honest, because we're so crazy partisan that it can seem like so much of the world is just black and white, and it's like that's not true in the real world. And I hope that with Elon, I'm like kind of like you, I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about the future of Twitter. I'm hoping that by emphasizing the importance of free speech, that'll enable more people to see the complexity of the world. That there are people who can lean conservative but not be hardcore conservative, and there are people who can lean liberal but not be super progressive. Like there are shades to the political spectrum.
Definitely.
And not just that, but also with, like, say, religion and spirituality and lifestyle. So I hope, kind of getting back to the artistic side, I hope that can inspire more creative ideas as well. So much of the art that's been coming out over the last few years, at least in the pop culture realm, has been, very blatantly political, and also just from like one specific side. And I'm not saying artists shouldn't be political, but it's when you get partisan, when you say, like, my side is right and the other side's bad. And so when you're so explicit about that, there's nothing deep or profound about your art. But when you're touching on a political idea, but you're kind of leaving it up to the audience to kind of see. I was like, okay, that's interesting. That's like, okay, like, this could be conservative, or it could be progressive, or it could be a little of both, or it could be neither. Or it's like, that's interesting. And so I'm hoping that Twitter can kind of de-radicalize people a bit and be like, okay, there are shades to every idea and every policy and every view, and hopefully that'll trickle into the creative work that'll be coming out.
I mean, and I've said this on Twitter before, like, Twitter is essentially, it's a bunch of us, like, upvoting good ideas. It's a bunch of us kind of mass curating the ideas that the human race makes. And obviously not everybody's on Twitter, but like, for the people who are on Twitter, you write something, and if it resonates with other people, then they'll retweet it or like it, and the algorithm works to where that gets shared with other people and more people see it. And so on some level, I have this, a bit of faith that when you have so many people who are, it's like human beings resonate with honesty. They resonate with truth, and that, I mean, to me, that is fantastic. That's the reason why I have hope for us.
Yeah.
Because sure, there are many people who dive into lies and who want to control other people and who are willing to lie and fabricate and all of that stuff, of course. But on some level, like, all of us resonate with the truth. And like I've said this before, like, if to nobody else, at least be honest to yourself about, yeah, I had that thought, or yeah, I did that thing, or whatever. Like, be honest with yourself. Yeah. And so I think that Twitter, because again, we resonate with things that seem honest more often than not, I think, as human beings, that's my part of my faith, is that, like, it allows, because of the way the algorithms and the numbers work, it allows all of us to kind of contribute to, like, the uplifting of the best ideas.
Yes.
Does that mean that there are going to be bad ideas that get shared a million times? Yes. Like, but at the same time, to your point, like, I think it's like we're on Twitter trying to, if we're being honest, like, the honest thing is what you're talking about. The honest thing is vagaries in the middle.
Yeah.
Honest, the honest, the truthful situation of a human being is that maybe you lean more left than you do right, but there are some things that you would very much agree with a conservative person about, or with a liberal person, or whatever. Yeah. And the better that people communicate in that way on Twitter, like, I see those types of communications being shared and lauded, and if I do a good job or if somebody else does a good job writing something that's like honest and authentic, you get a lot of people who will respond saying thank you for this, thank you for this this nuanced take.
Yes.
You see a lot of people who are just like, thank God, like I've been looking for somebody who's willing to say this, because again, it's like willing to say it, because it's not going to perfectly fit in with the people on the left, and it's not going to perfectly fit in with the people on the right. And so you're going to take some flack from both of those sides, which means you have to be willing to take it a little bit.
Yeah.
But then other people see it and they're like, yes, like, even if they don't fully agree with you, they seem to be excited for people, again, just to be authentic and honest and nuanced and willing to say when you don't know stuff. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's a huge thing too. It's like, we're all expected to know everything,
right.
But we don't,
yeah.
and we don't know exactly what the outcome. Like, I believe in free markets, and I believe in this democratic republic that we live in, and freedom above all. But at the same time, like, I understand what freedom does in terms of keeping the totalitarians at bay, but it also allows people to do bad things in the world. Like, we're not all rigidly in lockstep wearing the same clothes and saying the same things. There are people who have, because of freedom, are able to go out and do bad things, and maybe they'll suffer the consequences afterward, but they still were able to do it, shoot up a school or whatever. It's like,
right.
Those things happen. And so in terms of my faith in freedom, it's like, I still don't know what the ultimate outcome is going to be. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I can't guarantee those things. And the more people I think are willing to say, hey, I believe in this, but I'm not sure exactly what the outcome is going to be. I understand it may not work out exactly as well as I hoped. I think the more that we can have real conversations about life and about governance, and I mean, if for example, if we all looked at the government saying, hey, like, maybe we need to lower taxes here or do this government program, and then, like, let's all come back in 2 years and take a look at how did it go.
Right.
And, like, because none of us really know how well it's going to work.
Yeah.
And at least being honest with it, other people like that. But like, wouldn't that be great if there was some sort of accountability, like, with this experiment that we're doing, because like both sides just act like they know exactly what's going to happen, exactly what the consequences are going to be. Right. And I'm kind of the mindset of like, none of us really know, but what if we had a system where we more often checked in with the programs that we funded and said, are they working? Like, when was the last time we cut a government program or cut an agency? Right. Because it wasn't working anymore. Like, that's the problem with government, is that it's this metastasizing thing that it's never able to, like, prune itself.
Yes. And it's funny, and it's always the other party's fault. It cracks me up because like I lived in California my entire life, which is very progressive.
Okay. And I'm from Reno, just originally. I'm from
where?
Reno, Nevada.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've been there.
So I'm a West Coast guy. Yeah.
It always cracks me up whenever I see I've also lived in pretty, like, I was born and raised in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, and then now I live in LA, so definitely very blue cities, regions. So whenever a program gets enacted and then it doesn't work, and then somebody will ask politicians about why it didn't work, and they'll often blame Republicans. It's like, but when has there been like a prominent Republican? It's like 99% of the politicians in the city are Democrats. Like, why you blame the Republican Party for why the thing failed? And I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of a similar thing in deep red states, in deep red regions, where it's like, oh, this program didn't work, but it's because of Democrats. It's like, yeah, but it's a small rural town, and it's like everybody's Republican. Why are you blaming Democrats for this? Right. But yeah, it is very frustrating. It's like, I would have so much more respect for politicians of either party if they said, we tried this two years ago and it made the problem worse, so we're going to
wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah. Like, wouldn't you actually have a little bit of faith in the people who are who are supposedly governing us or representing us, if they came back and they said, like, we honestly tried and it didn't work the way we thought, and so we think the best thing now is to axe it, or cut it by half, or put the money into this other thing. Now we're going to try this other thing, because but it's like, because I think a lot of it has to do with it's monies that are being like taken from the public and
Yeah.
put into government, without, there's really no accountability. There's no way to say no to it other
Right.
than electing a different person who then has to like vote in a certain way. Again, I don't know the last time that anything got cut. I'm sure that things have been, but they really should make a point of like, man, I'd love it if a politician got up there and ran and said like, hey, this is kind of an experiment and this is what we're going to do for 3 years. And then we're going to like take a year to analyze it. And then we're going to change things based on that. And, but even then we don't know what the changes are going to cause. So then we're going to look at it in another couple of years. It's like, that's how sane people would run a government, but they are vying for their jobs. There's a huge amount of money in whatever agency got, money for whatever project, and all those people, that's like their livelihoods. And then if that agency or bureau or whatever goes away, then they don't have jobs anymore. It's like, and then, anybody who looks at that, and it's easy to make well, you can't take jobs away from people, like that's their livelihood. And the flip side is like, well, go look at the normal free market. Like businesses survive and then sometimes they don't.
Right.
And it's based on if they're doing their job, if they're providing a product or service that people want. It's like the government seems somehow to be outside of that game. And I think it specifically has to do with, we take taxes and then use it to fund the government. Does that mean we can't have taxes? I don't know. I'm not sitting here saying like we should never be taxed.
Sure.
But man, it's gotten out of control, and like nobody seems to be talking like we are. Nobody in government seems to be talking about like how to judge the effectiveness of what they're doing. Like CEOs have year-end reports where they have to say like, hey, this department did great, this one kind of sucked. And like, when was the last time anybody did that?
So we just got a new mayor in LA, and Karen Bass, and she made like a promise of like, oh, my first year in office, I'm gonna do this with homelessness and blah. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna take your deal seriously, because like there should be a punishment where it's like, okay, so if in 100 days in your first year and you didn't achieve it, and I'm willing to like, okay, maybe you achieved 80%. But like, and count that as a passing grade, but it's like if you don't get close to your goal, like you should get like at least a dock and pay or something. Like, I mean, there should be something. Like, don't be like, oh, it's because of gridlock, it's because the city hall won't let me do the thing. It's like, no, you made a promise and you failed. That's why you were voted for.
But, I mean, maybe we need term limits for pretty much everybody. That's kind of what I'm coming down to, because ultimately we're forcefully taking money in the form of taxes from people and using it to fund services that people often don't want or don't care about, and so it's like, if that's going to be the situation, then maybe people shouldn't be able to make careers in government. I mean, that's kind of what I'm coming to. I'm like, maybe you shouldn't be able to go into this thing and then like be fat and happy because your source of income is guaranteed. It's like, that behaviorally, that doesn't encourage you, the person who is getting the secured income, to do your job. Like, because humans are lazy. Like, sometimes we're great, but then sometimes when everything is handed to us, we don't work that hard. And like, that's just human nature. But that's, I think part of the problem is, I don't think progressives are like, in general, super happy with like accepting the fact that humans aren't perfect or can't be perfected. There's some aspect of like, we have these systems because humans don't always act the way that they're supposed to. And that's just a tough truism of life. But you have people, oh no, if we just do this, then everything will be fine. I'm like, there's no utopia. There isn't one. So just, and people will go, I mean, you look at communism in the 20th century, people will do terrible things to each other. In the hope that it leads to this thing. And you see that with religion too. I mean, it's not, the best religious people aren't forcing other people to do things in the hope of some like divine final
Yeah.
place that they get to. You know, it's
Right.
like once you start doing that, it gets crazy because you can't have, it's like utopia is never going to happen. So it'll always be outside of your grasp. And
Yeah.
the people then who grasp onto utopia harder and harder will do more and more terrible things to get there.
Yeah.
Because because especially after you start doing any terrible things, then it's like you have to keep justifying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like as soon as you fire somebody because they didn't get a shot, you know, or
Yeah.
you do something to somebody like that, then how do you reconcile that with yourself? If you realize a couple of years later, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have acted that way to somebody about whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's guilt, you know, because like
Yeah.
you start pushing people around because of your ideals, and that's where we are. It's an interesting place. So,
well, speaking of, to kind of bring this back to the creative side of things,
Yeah.
you know, I'm curious what your thoughts are on what artists should do to survive, you know, this climate that we're in, that's hostile to sort of like, you know, not towing the party line. That's you know, hostile to people taking risks and being authentic. What are the things that artists should do to be able to like survive and even thrive in this environment?
well, I mean, there's no easy answer to that.
Yeah.
I think what you have to realize is that totalitarianism is a desire to force the feelings that I think artists already have. Like totalitarians think that they can make society just right to where everybody then will be happy, right?
Right.
Well, firstly, everybody's not happy.
Yeah.
Nobody's happy consistently. Like you're up and down. That's life. You're up and down. And so I think like artists first and foremost need to understand that the thing that bolsters their heart against the allure of totalitarianism is their art.
Mm.
So do it a lot, even if you're not making any money.
Yeah.
You know, just do it. Do it more than you used to. Like
Yeah.
dive into it. So you know that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to pay the bills,
Right.
but it's going to keep you. It's going to keep the important things in your mind. And like we all have to make habits. We all have to work out, you know, and eat right. And there are things that just have to be done. Like do your art a lot, or do, you know, if you're not an artist, do the thing that gets you a little teary-eyed. Do that more and more often, because when you look at life and you're like, this is fantastic. You know, even though there are tragedies, if there's something in it that makes you sustained, then you know you can tell the totalitarians to fuck off. And like that's what I hope that, and so then there's that, and then there's the courage, I would say, to speak, whether it's in person to friends or online on Twitter, whether it's anonymously or with your name. I don't care, just say the truth,
Right.
And I think it's going to go a long ways, and I think people are already doing that. I mean, like, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it.
Your point reminds me of a quote, and I have it on my phone. So I was listening to you because I want to bring this quote. It's from C.S. Lewis.
Okay.
If men had postponed the search for knowledge and beauty until they were secure, the search would never have begun. And I like that. It connects so much to what you're talking about, where it's like, yeah, we're living in kind of, you know, crazy, turbulent times right now, but don't let that stop you from creating, or at the very least searching out beauty.
Right.
And in fact, it's probably more important. And so he kind of elaborates a little bit more, and he's talking about men in World War I, I think. But he said, like, you know, even though like we were getting, you know, men were getting shot at and there are all these explosions, it's like, but men were still like, it's not like they were all they were talking about was the war. They were talking about like family and food and kind of like the little things in life. And it's like that's the most extreme time. Like you would think that's not the time to be talking about, you know, life, you know, the finer things in life. But it's like, no, sorry, we need something to get us through these difficult times. Even if it's like just talking about like my favorite sandwich or whatever. It's like, yeah, like that's what brings you happiness. Like if that's what gets you through these turbulent times, and go for it.
I don't disagree. I think I said it at the beginning, and I've said it on a tweet recently. Like, I think people are remembering the important things of life.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and tell you what those important things are.
Right.
But because it's different to everybody.
Yeah.
But I think we all are aware that there are things we do in life that are superfluous, superficial, that time wasting, and we probably spend a lot of time doing some of those things. Yeah. We've all done those things. And it's when you get forced to go through an experience like we've all gone through in the last 3 years, or any sort of harrowing experience, I think it reminds you, hey, like, there are things that aren't superfluous. That's how you say that word. Yeah. There are things that, I mean, even if it's just like, when was the last, like, how often do people just lay in bed, for example, and listen to music?
Yeah.
Like, not while talking on the computer, not while looking at their phone, not while watching TV.
Yeah.
Like, just listen to music, or just read a book, like, or just go for a walk. Like, I've been walking so much the last year or so. It's become very meditative for me. And
yeah.
I mean, I've made kind of I probably walk for 45 minutes a day, like just getting outside. Like, if I haven't gotten outside during the day, now that it's become this habit, I'm like, wow, I need to go outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if I had that feeling, if I was aware of that feeling throughout the rest of my life, where I was like, I just need to get outside. But now it's there. And I'm like, this is great. I'll put on a podcast, or sometimes I'll just listen to the birds or the cars as they drive by. I mean, I'm walking down streets and neighborhoods and busy streets and roads, and yet it's what I want.
Yeah.
You start doing things like that, listening to music or reading or sanding a deck, or like doing something that requires you to put your mind into it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of, like, we are so fragmented. All the technology allows us to, get an email or get a text at any point, and it can pop up, and it breaks your concentration.
Right.
And I'm not a Luddite. I'm not sitting here saying we should burn our computers or anything like that.
No.
But I do think it's become obvious that there are things that technology doesn't do for us.
Yeah.
That we need to go do for ourselves.
Yes.
And again, I think people are realizing that, and that's why, again, if they are more entrenched than we all know, and they really could all just like whip us up and turn off all of our banks and corral us into things and do terrible things. Okay, well, I'm not exactly sure how to forestall that, other than that's going to come to blows between the world and the totalitarians.
Yeah.
But until then, it's like I don't think that they won, and the truth is, like, they're fucking unhappy people. Yeah. And that's why they want to control everybody. Yeah. And so this was what I was going to say to your other point. What can artists do? Like, we're having so much fun. Like, it's not, again, we don't have to glorify the fun by taking awesome photos of the fun, but like, don't be afraid to like show people how much you love life.
Right.
Because in the end, like, if they're on the fence between going the direction of the control freaks, or going the direction of people who have figured out how to be in love with life, right? If you're vocal and cool in the way of like, you're relaxed, come on, like, hey, like, just because you were a totalitarian during COVID doesn't mean you can't like see the error of your ways. Come on back over. Like, we are, like, we're having so much more fun over here than you are. Right. Yeah. Like, whatever your political bent, when it gets to that kind of control freak thing, which we've seen a lot of people do that, friends and neighbors and family members, and like, all of us have stories that we've especially seen in the last 3 years. I think it's key to remind yourself and to remind them, like, there's joy. There's real joy in pursuing the things that mean things to you, and in like relaxing a little, not feeling like you have to control somebody else or their life or whatever.
Right.
And that, that takes some faith, because like, and it doesn't necessarily have to be religious faith, but it has to be some sort of like, okay, I'm willing to just take the consequences of me being honest and going out for joy, going out for, the thing that means the most to me, whether it's my idea of God or my idea about art or beauty. It's like, just go toward that. And you're going to be so much happier.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think that's actually a great note to end on. And, but thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This is a great conversation.
This has been fantastic. If people, do you mind if I let people know?
Yeah. Plug yourself. Yeah.
Find my stuff.
Yeah.
So all the newest stuff is on YouTube. So just look up Cecil Charles or Cecil Charles Official, the Cecil Charles as it is on the screen. That's my Twitter handle. So you can find me there. I've got some stuff on Spotify and iTunes that I did with my producer in Nashville. And I've got new stuff in the works. So you can kind of, I'm like I said, grown vocally a lot in the last few years. So the stuff I did in Nashville, I'm very proud of and I love. At the same time, I'm very excited about what I'm doing now. So you can kind of hear that movement on YouTube because, it's all chronological and you can hear how I sounded a few years ago and how I sound now. There's a Substack. If you look up Cecil Charles, I write some stuff there and
very cool. And I'll be sure to include that stuff in the description as well.
Okay.
So
cool.
Well, thanks for coming on. And let's do this again, man. Let's check in. Let's check in on and what's going on in arts and culture and politics, and hopefully see if things have gotten crazier or if things have tampered down a little bit. And
hopefully a little mix of both. So we have new stuff to talk about next time. This has been great. You're super easy to talk to, and this.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I know we've been talking about doing this for like a year.
I know. So I'm glad we finally got this.
Because I got kicked off Twitter for like 7 or 8 months.
That's right. Yeah. Do you remember what it was? That got you kicked off?
Well, so they never gave me anything specifically. Like they did. It wasn't like, hey, you need to delete this tweet and then we'll let you back on. It was, you are permanently suspended for evading permanent suspension. Right? Which sounds like a total catch 22, like double speak 1984. Like I'm like, that's so fitting. But they didn't ever explain what that meant. I heard from other people that was like the wording that they would use if somebody had multiple accounts. Like, you were trying to like evade permanent suspension by having all these different accounts. But I'd never been suspended before, and I only have the one account. So and then they never responded until 7 months later. And I got back on Twitter and I just got a little email that was like, oh, we mistakenly flagged you as spam. I'm like, cool. Well, good for you.
My co-host, Ben, he said that he's only been suspended from Twitter twice. And then both times were when he visited me in LA. So I don't know if it's something in LA just brought out the crazy side in him.
He picked up something from you.
Yeah. But
speaking too much truth.
But seriously, man. Let's have you back on soon. And thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, thank you so much. You have a great one. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, take care.